And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late on a Thursday evening. Lots to get into, so we're going to move rather quickly here. So we'll get started with Major League Baseball. Lots to get into on the free agency front, especially with Kyle Tucker and updates on Bichette. We'll start with Kyle Tucker, where there was lots of headlines made earlier today about the Dodgers being in there on a short-term offer, the Blue Jays being in there on more of a longer-term deal. But don't forget about the New York Mets. Jon Heyman coming in from the top rope anyway, just to make sure you didn't forget the New York team was still in the running here for Kyle Tucker, very much in the same marketplace that the Los Angeles Dodgers are in on a high average annual value over a shorter-term contract. Now it's going to be ultimately up to Kyle Tucker. Does he want the short-term deal with a higher average annual value, or does he get the long-term security? Based off of the last season Kyle Tucker just had, he had a great first couple of months of the season, then looked like one of the worst players in the game for about a month and change, and then started to figure things out in the back half. Now, injuries were also a part of his season last year, so that does come into play here when you're talking about future money. Does he want to go ahead and bet on himself and get the high average annual value? If I were in his shoes, honestly, I couldn't tell you which way I'd be leaning. It really depend on just the overall dollars here. Say the Dodgers come in at, say, $50 million, a huge deal for 4 years. So that's $200 million over a 4-year period. You obviously would still have 6 years more of money after that if the Blue Jays gave you $300 million over 10 years. Do you think you could make an extra $100 million in salary over 6 years remaining in your playing career? If I'm Kyle Tucker, I would probably lean towards taking the shorter-term deal because I could bet on myself and think, hey, I just made that amount of money, that $100 million, in 2 seasons playing for the Dodgers. And oh, by the way, my profile is going to go way through the roof because I'm likely going to be a World Series champion once again. So let us know in the comment section, which deal would you take? If both offers were on the table, 10 years, 300, we'll call it $350 million, just to make it a little bit more interesting. 10 years, $350 million to go sign with the Toronto Blue Jays, who were in the World Series, that still added a bunch of pieces this year. You're going to be competing in the very difficult American League East for the remainder of your career. Or do you go to the National League, going to the title favorites, the World Series favorite, the Los Angeles Dodgers, and play with the best player in the game in Shohei Ohtani? Possibly win a World Series, maybe 2. Play with the best starting rotation in the game, unquestionably. Bullpen, of course, is still up in the air, but you just added the best closer in the game. Let us know in the comments section, which would you take? 10 for $350 to go to the Blue Jays, or would you take 4 for $200 from either the Mets or the Dodgers? I'll say the Dodgers for now because that's going to be the more interesting team for me if I were to take a shorter-term deal because, again, they're the title favorite, not the Mets as currently constructed. All right, let's try to check up on a few of these comments, and we'll get into some of the other headlines as well. Andrew, Aiden, Justin, B. Lee, welcome in. Welcome in. Is Marte off the market, Mike? It does appear so. Ketel Marte, in case you guys are wondering, was put on the market earlier this offseason by the Arizona Diamondbacks as they look to kind of retool their starting staff. They've certainly done a nice job this offseason, kind of adding pieces here or there, but it seems like the team is going to go ahead and hold on to Ketel Marte. He is not a bad player for them. He is certainly an aircraft carrier no matter who he's playing for, but there was an opportunity that the Diamondbacks could have recouped some value for him, really reset their payroll structure as well, getting some really cheap contracts on their roster for years to come. Ultimately, they could still try to trade him at the trade deadline or next year. He's still going to be the exact same value next year because he's got several years left of control. But as far as where his market is at right now, a couple of the second basemen have already been traded that were on the market. And I think the team that was pushing hardest for him, the Boston Red Sox, have turned their eye more towards a guy like Brendan Donovan or other free agent pursuits as well. Do not be surprised if they try to bring back Alex Bregman in their as a short-term third base option. Very much on the similar deal to what we just saw last offseason when they signed him to the 3-year deal with the opt-outs after the first and second year. But Marte is off the table, it looks like. Now, obviously, things could change rapidly. Suddenly, the Red Sox come to the table and say, hey, we'll give you Witherspoon, we'll give you Early, we'll give you a couple other nice pieces as well. That could certainly kick things off again, but as it stands right now, seems like the Diamondbacks are turning the page, at least, on the Ketel Marte trade market. Yeah, I know the Jays will probably go to $350 if they need to. I think they will. Honestly, the numbers that we saw thrown around this past offseason, a year ago and change for Shohei and Aaron Judge in years past and Juan Soto, Those are really big numbers. Even during the season this past year with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., really kind of reset expectations for some free agents. They thought they'd get this mega payday. It's just not out there for him. And Kyle Tucker was expected to get something over $400 million after those deals were signed because that just seems to be the progression of things. Hold on. We got the CBA negotiations going on. Some of the big market teams aren't willing to go above it until they know what the future of their finances are going to look like, what the new structure is going to be. Is there going to be a cap? Is there going to be a floor? What's the new things, or what are the new ramifications going to be? But I think Kyle Tucker, Zach Gallen, Framber Valdez, and others have found a rude awakening in free agency this year, and their values will be depressed. Do not be surprised if Valdez signs a deal for 3 years at $90 to $100 million. He was expecting to get something in the neighborhood of what Dylan Cease got. He ain't going to touch that stratosphere. Bellinger was looking for something in the $300 million range. That's obviously come down. I think he was a little bit foolhardy to think that was a possibility. But we are getting reports. We'll go ahead and go into our second topic here on Bellinger. Is that the Yankees have made a couple of different offers, formal offers, pen to paper offers, not just, hey, what do you think of the idea of, say, 7 for 30? No, they actually put pen to paper and gave the contract to him to look at and sign. Ultimately, he turned down both of those contract offers. Do I think that closes the door on him back to New York? Absolutely not. We are hearing reports today of actual numbers being thrown around at 7 years plus for for $30+ million. That gets an offer to around 210. That doesn't sound like it's going to get it done. This number is probably going to come in around 240, if I had to guess, maybe 270. But I don't think it breaks 300 overall. He is certainly a very valuable player on this market. Mets are certainly in on him along with Kyle Tucker. But the Yankees and Mets, to me, are the hardest drivers here for Bellinger. I've heard some rumblings about the Cubs over the past couple of weeks anyway. I just don't buy them as a serious suitor for him. If the other teams weren't willing to pony up $30 million, sure. On a shorter-term deal, if they bumped up the average annual value, maybe that's something they would consider. But it just doesn't seem to be in their playbook. They like to offload some of their own homegrown talent and try to keep their payroll down because, again, this ownership group has other commitments overseas for their finances. So while they're willing to spend and build a nice team around them, they went all in last year, and obviously that blew up in their face. They didn't have a rotation that they really trusted. They make the trade for Edward Cabrera, giving up their number one prospect in Owen Casey in the process to do so. The task for them now is to improve their lineup, according to multiple media reports right now. To me, I'd still be looking to add more to this rotation. You told me everything I needed to know about your rotation when you got to the playoffs last year, that you didn't trust the arms you had. Now, you're going to have some of those arms coming back from injury that you didn't have available, sure. You're going to have some progression from some young guys, Horton and others, sure. But I still think you need more arms there in Chicago. I think they needed to add two starters that could start a postseason game for you. And so far they've added one. We'll see if they decide to add one more and possibly move off of Jameson Taillon in the process as well. But again, in the comment section, just curious what your answers are. Do you take the Blue Jays offer 10 for 350, or do you take a team like the Dodgers 4 for 200 if you're Kyle Tucker? We'll get to some of those comments in just a moment. They aren't going to lose Tucker to the Mets or Dodgers. I kind of am, in lockstep with you there, Jeff Passan, speaking about a month ago on, I believe, the Michael Kay show, basically saying he expected them to get 2 of the 3 free agents out there. With Okamoto signing, I just don't think that's necessarily going to happen for Bregman or Bichette or Bellinger. I do still think that they're going to be able to get Kyle Tucker done. It's just a matter of time. They are the only team that's really offering a long-term contract here. Now, if you're offering, say, 10 for 350, like I was mentioning, that makes it a lot more compelling of an offer than, say, 4 for 50. Who knows if they're even offering 50 per season? But, let us know in the comments what you guys think. Andrew, how about my Phillies in on Bo Bichette? Let's go ahead and jump in on that one. Now, things have really changed this offseason as far as free agent values. Talked a little bit earlier this show about how free agents got into this period here and were not happy with the numbers that were being thrown around. Got to think that's got to have a big impact from the CBA negotiations. Some of the smaller market teams are willing to spend. They're not going to spend stupid money, but they're willing to spend and increase their salary a little bit in an attempt to make look like they're trying to field a more competitive team, at least financially anyway. Increasing their financial commitments in a year where they're about to negotiate the CBA. The big market teams are waiting to see what those new financial terms are going to be of that new CBA before they really dole out the big dollars. Now, the big guys are still going to get paid. They're still going to do very well in free agency, but they might not get the long-term deals they were ultimately looking for. The middle class of the free agency group, that might ultimately get squeezed a little bit here. So as we get closer to spring training, as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting, do not be surprised if you see some guys that you might picture as more a number 3, 4, 5 starter, a utility guy in the infield, a third or fourth outfielder, a DH type, to really see their values depressed and squeezed here as we get closer to spring training. But as far as Bo Bichette to the Phillies, as free agency has really changed, Bohm gets the arbitration number done. I believe that number got done today as well. Things have kind of changed there in Philadelphia. They're at least open to the idea of Bo Bichette. I'm not entirely sold that they're going to have to move off of another player in order to make this deal happen. I think they're just trying to improve their ability in that division because they know the Mets are going to continue to add, as they should. They need a couple of starters there. They have financial commitments, of course, to Manaea and others, but they need another top-end starter there. Looks like Valdez could be the guy there. With that being said, the Braves are going to be better next year as well. And then, of course, you have the behemoth out in the West Coast with the Los Angeles Dodgers being the favorite for the World Series. Phillies are still a good team. They're my favorite anyway to at least, or one of my favorites anyway, to get to the postseason, either as a division winner or a wild card. And I do think they have a good chance to make a run this postseason. I do love the addition of Adolis Garcia. I still think they're going to have to figure out their rotation. I have question marks up and down in that rotation. What's going to happen with Wheeler? What's the health of him? Do they bring back Suarez? Will they finally get this deal done with JT Realmuto? But they're still going to be a very good team overall. But if you add another impact bat, like a Bo Bichette, say the number turns out to be, I don't know, say 3 for 75. That's $25 million per season. That's nowhere near what Bo Bichette was expecting to get in this free agency term. So say he gets an opt-out after the first year. Maybe even increase the offer to, say, $30 million in the first season. You give him, say, 25 in the second year and, say, 25 in the third year. Say it's a 3-year, $80 million deal. Front load the deal a little bit just to give him a little bit better money in the first year of that deal. If he has a terrible season, obviously he locks into that contract and they just try to make it work in year 2. But if this works in year 1, you're talking about a team that adds a, I'm not going to say a lineup changing hitter in there like a Bryce Harper would be or a Shohei Ohtani, but he's certainly a difference maker from the standpoint he gives you another reliable bat that you can count on. Is he somebody that you can put in the top 5 of your lineup and feel comfortable with? Absolutely. With as deep as the Philadelphia lineup is going to be, you very well could put him at 6 or 7 in that lineup and have one of the most deep lineups in the sport to help combat that starting pitching from the Los Angeles Dodgers. So let us know in the chat where you guys think he'll ultimately go. Do you think it's the right decision for the Phillies to bring him in? Where would he play? Would they offload Bohm? I know that's a popular talking point for Phillies fans. I doubt, honestly, that would happen. I'm just not sure the trade value he would ultimately have. I think ultimately you hold on to him. And if he leaves in free agency after the season, so be it. But I'm trying to build as best a lineup as I can to compete with the Dodgers this season. Damn the torpedoes, if you will, and just see if this thing can really get to work in here. But as far as Bo Bichette to the Philadelphia Phillies, do I think this thing has legs? I do. I think Bo Bichette was going to be this year's Trevor Story. I've talked about that several different times. That how the year where they had 5 great shortstops on the market, Trevor Story ultimately was the one left without a chair. Red Sox pounced and thought they were getting a great deal. 6 for, I believe, 140 is what he got. Ultimately, it didn't work out. One of the worst contracts the Red Sox have signed in recent years. He started to perform a little bit better to make the contract look a little bit more palatable. But the Red Sox were looking for a bargain on the free agent market, and they got one in Trevor Story. And ultimately, it didn't work out. Bo Bichette looks to be at a similar point right now in his free agency arc here. Does he sign the long-term deal with a team like the Nationals, who have money to burn right now, somebody to take their money like that? I think is where the Nationals were really hoping to kind of get things rolling here. But maybe they view themselves as a year or 2 away from doing that. I mean, this is the year. You got James Wood. You got a lot of good young pieces built around this roster. Some pieces haven't worked out. Now's the time to supplement this roster. The idea last year was of trading for Nathaniel Lowe was to at least give them a decent veteran presence on this team to allow them to spend in this year's free agency period. They haven't really done that. Maybe they're waiting for the new CBA. For whatever the reason, I thought Bo Bichette would be a great fit there. I still think he could be. But for the Philadelphia Phillies, do I think he could ultimately end up there? If you asked me yesterday, I probably would have told you maybe a 2% chance, if something, crazy happens. But with the reports coming out today that he has got a meeting scheduled, those kinds of things, I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to, say, in the 20 to 30% range. I don't want to put a specific number on it, but in that range feels about right for him. I still think it's more likely that he ends up somewhere else, just because of the logistics financially for the Philadelphia Phillies to make that work with their payroll. Would be a little bit interesting to see how they decide to get that deal done. Nick Castellanos, of course, is one of the albatrosses on their roster. They're not going to find anybody to take that salary, obviously, unless they give up a stupid amount of prospects, and they're not going to do that. But we'll see where Bichette ultimately lands. B. you really think the Jays will just stop at 300? I don't. I do think they're going to go much higher. My expectation was they were going to be north of 400 before the season, before this past season, but ultimately it's not going to happen. How about Mike McDaniels getting fired? No kidding. I saw an article today that he's now the favorite for the Ravens job. Like, what? This is a guy that during the middle of the season, lots of the sports talk pundits out there were talking about, how does this guy even have a job? The Ravens are looking for more of an offensive mind from what I've heard. Maybe that's the impetus for him being the, quote, favorite here, but, the relationship supposedly soured between Lamar Jackson and Harbaugh to a certain point. Monken, of course, is the OC. Didn't really work out as well towards the end of that tenure. At least those are some of the rumblings you're hearing. So maybe that does leave the door open here for a Mike McDaniel, but I would be looking somewhere else. Mike McDaniel, to me, is more of an offensive coordinator. He does not have the temperament of a coach, to me, as far as a head coach. He doesn't have the gravitas in the boardroom, if you will, to be able to make the decisions that need to be made, to relay the information to the GM, to get the players that he needs to have. I get he was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to get Tua to work, and Tua didn't work. And, for whatever part he played in that, he has to bear that cross. So, for me, Mike McDaniel, to me, needs to get another job as an OC. I just don't believe him as a head coach to be able to handle the organization the way it really needs to be handled. I think he has got all the smarts in the world and could probably make all the right decisions on paper. But as far as, making the personnel moves, I have serious questions about him getting the most production out of a roster when it comes to the right players on the roster. Now, as far as the players that he's got to work with, he didn't really have much to work with at certain points last year due to Tua's injury. This past season as well was up and down. Tua, of course, being benched at the end because they knew the experiment had basically run its course. But to me, there's just too many misses here for Mike McDaniel. Go back to being an OC, take a little bit of that pressure off. Go back to drawing up plays, the best thing that what you're really good at from that Kyle Shanahan tree. If they need to go 400, absolutely. Let's see here. I would go for a long-term deal. I would as well. Andrew, I think it depends on the Jays. For Bichette, if the Jays want to find a fit for him, whether it's a trade or freeing up more room for him to sign Tucker or just signing him outright. The Jays are still in there for Bichette, but I'm not sure how fervently. The Okamoto addition kind of, puts a logjam on their infield already. You mentioned the idea of a trade possibly there, Bealey. I do think that could be a possibility. Santander's first year did not go well at all. Maybe you could find a team willing to buy low on him and eat the money there. I doubt it, but that would be one way to at least horseshoe him in there. You got two outfielders that are hitting free agency next season in Varsho and Springer. Money will be coming off the books here. So if they do want to do Tucker and Bichette, there are pathways they could get there, but those pathways are far more limited than they were before the Okamoto signing. Should we look into anything about Anthony Davis leaving the game early? I would. The main thing I'm wondering about is if he broke his hand. If he broke his hand, could be anywhere from a month to the entire season. Obviously, that's a death knell for trade rumors for him. Let me, in fact, pull up the sheet here. Got a couple of notifications that just popped. Just making sure nothing crazy. No update yet on his health status. Sounded like he would have been able to stay in the game. At least Anthony Davis tried to do that anyway. But as far as his health, it's up in the air as far as whether or not it's just a sprained finger or dislocated finger, which honestly could be something like that. But he was doubled over in pain walking down the tunnel, so it's very painful. I would not be surprised if there's some level of a fracture in there. As long as it's nothing too major, even if it does keep him out a month, I don't think it really changes his trade value at all. Now, if he misses the entire season, obviously that's a different discussion. But as far as Anthony Davis, as long as he's able to get back by, say it's a fracture and he's out for 4 to 6 weeks, that would put him in mid-February. I think the Hawks would still give just as much as they would, with or without that information. Now, would they obviously prefer to have him? No kidding. But I just think with Anthony Davis, injuries are just a part of it. He is a very impactful player on the floor whenever he is healthy. And I think you're paying for that, or you're at least not paying the premium that it would normally cost for an Anthony Davis level player because of, one, the contract, and two, the injuries. But as far as reading into it, I wouldn't read anything into it yet until we get some prognosis as to whether or not it was just a sprain, a jam, a stinger, fracture, or a major break that requires surgery that could end his season. All of those are on the table. I would not be surprised if we get some news tomorrow, since we haven't heard anything yet, that x-rays were done. They're going to be very protective about him. He'll probably miss a game or two as they, let that thing heal, just to make sure there's not a fracture, those kinds of things. And just, then you get the trade deal with the Atlanta Hawks going here in the next week or two. Would not be surprised if that's the course of action here with Anthony Davis. Bealey, but if the Jays don't want him back, I think Philly is a very good spot for him to land. I agree. I think it'd be a good spot for him there. Lucas, welcome back. What's up, Michael? Watching from my library. All right. Appreciate you joining as well, Lucas, once again. Mr. AC Milan, welcome back. Been a minute since I've seen you in our chat as well. Bellinger wants 210. Bo wants 300. Tucker 400. Are they insane? No. I mean, you look at the numbers that were being thrown around for Vladdy and all the other free agents the last couple of years. They thought the money was going to be there for them, and the market really kicked off strong with the signing of Dylan Cease. But I think the rest of the market saw that signing and just said, "Hold on, let's slow down here. We're not necessarily comfortable with those numbers, especially with the CBA coming up here. So let's press pause on this." And that's why I think we saw most of this action really take until after New Year's to really get things going here once again for those top-level free agents. Now, as far as your ask, Bellinger 210. I think they've already passed that as far as contract offers right now. Bo Bichette, I think his offseason could have gone two very different ways. If he had a great year, looked like a perennial all-star like he was early in his career with the Blue Jays, I think he would easily have gotten the $300 million. That's not going to happen. I think he's looking more likely at a sub-$100 million contract offer. We talked about that at the beginning of the year, how this was a make-or-break season for Bo Bichette. This year did not go according to plan. He still had some decent offensive numbers. He still is an impact bat, at least on the offensive side of things. The glove is a lot of question marks, especially at short. He tried to flex positions at the end of the year, just try to increase his value, increase his appeal to other teams who might view him as a second baseman or a third baseman in an effort to drive up the money in the free agency period. That hasn't happened. He's probably going to have to sign a short-term deal, a couple years, maybe a year. Maybe he takes a 3-year deal with opt-outs out of the first and second year, but he ain't touching $100 million, let alone $300 million. Tucker very likely could have gotten $400 million. If he had a first half or the first couple of months, if that had been in his entire season, he darn well would have gotten $400+ million, and he didn't have to worry about any of these short-term contract offers from the Mets or the Dodgers. I think he would already be a member of the Blue Jays at this point if that was the case. Obviously, the second half happened, injury happened, worst player in baseball for about a month happened as well. He is a difference-making bat when he's right. And outside of that, about a month anyway with the Chicago Cubs, he's been a very solid player, a very consistent player, contact, willing to work a walk, those kinds of things. That's a very valuable skill in this game. And for $400 million, if he had performed like that, like he did in the first couple of months, he would have easily eclipsed that. But with the market the way it is, teams trying to limit their long-term payroll, that's why it's a discussion anyway as to whether or not he'll take the long-term security of a Blue Jays offer or the short-term high average annual value from the Mets or the Dodgers. But as far as $400 million, I think that's out of the question. I think the Blue Jays probably going to be looking $300 to $350 most likely, and I think the other offers you're going to get are going to be anywhere between probably $35 to $50 million on a 3 to 4 year term. But we'll see which offer he ultimately takes. The other teams better sign Bellinger before Tucker signs, because if the Jays miss on Tucker, they will go Bellinger and Bichette immediately. I still think Bellinger is most likely for one of the two New York teams. Now, if they do, say the Blue Jays miss on Kyle Tucker, I don't think they will, but let's say they do. Say Tucker goes to the Mets or something like that and takes over for Marte in the outfield. That gives another impact bat to that Mets lineup, solves some of their lineup construction issues with the departure of Pete Alonso. More questions as far as how they deploy this lineup, of course, but that's we'll tackle that bridge once we get to spring training. But as far as, the next step for the Blue Jays if they miss on Tucker, I don't think Bellinger is the next player. I think that they would then turn to Bo Bichette or somebody along those lines and just see if they can plug things up, or just stand pat with what they've got already and just go to the bullpen, see if they can bulk up a little bit there. But I think the last big expenditure they could make could very well be on a Kyle Tucker. As far as Bellinger goes, I still think it's probably an 80% chance now at this point he goes to one of the two New York teams. Those teams are just salivating for a player like that, so we'll see where he does sign. But as far as the Blue Jays, Bichette is still in the running there for him to go there. Anthony, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us once again. Blue Jays are the only ones that are going to go more years on Tucker. Very true. 10 for 350 you would take. There's one vote for 10 for 350. If I'm the Phillies, I offer Bo 8 for 240 with opt-outs. 8 for 240? I wouldn't give him that contract at all. I mean, Bo Bichette looked like he could have been that type of a player, say, a couple of years ago, but the last couple of years have not been kind to Bo Bichette. Offensively, injury-wise, defensive questions, questions about his athleticism, how he's going to age long-term. All of those are big question marks, and to give him an 8-year term would be a little bit reckless in my opinion, but especially with the CBA negotiations coming up, I would expect him, say you're, pie in the sky, rosy outlook. I'm the agent for Bo Bichette. What can I reasonably tell my player that I can get him on the open market, for a goal for him to kind of shoot for here? I would say something in the 6-year range, like Trevor Story here. I would say probably best case scenario, he gets the Trevor Story deal of $140 million. I don't think he's going to touch 180. I don't think he touches 200, especially with the market after the Dylan Cease deal, basically saying 210 over that term. Let's slow down here. And he's not on the level with Tucker to me. He's not on the level with Bellinger. He's on that next tier. To me, he's even below that of Bregman as well. So Bichette is going to do well in free agency. I just think it's going to be on a short-term deal to rehab his value and then hit free agency once the CBA negotiations are done and you know what the big teams can really spend going forward. But I think that's more likely what he will ultimately do. You would personally take the Blue Jays offer, 2 votes for the long-term deal from the Jays. I agree there. We should trade Bohm. I knew we'd get a Bohm trade request here if Bichette does sign. I knew it was going to happen. JT walks, Nick's buyout, and moves Stott to third base. I do think you're going to get a release of Nick Castellanos, maybe a buyout if he gets if his agent hears rumblings that he's got a contract offer waiting for him, say like a 1-year, $2 million deal for the Rockies or something like that. Maybe he takes a couple $1 million off of that deal for the Phillies to save him some money, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. Most likely he's going to be released. Phillies are going to be on the hook for the entirety of it. I think JT Realmuto is going to stay there in Philadelphia. I just don't see how he ultimately signs elsewhere. I don't really see a team that's going to give him the money the Phillies already have on the table for him. But as far as moving Stott to third base, if they were able to move Bohm, not a bad idea. My question would be is, why make the move for Bo Bichette then? I get you think Bo Bichette's an upgrade over Bohm, but what exactly are you going to move on from Bohm for? Are you going to get a 6th, 7th inning reliever? Is that worth it to offload him? To me, I'd be trying to build the best lineup to compete against that Dodgers rotation more than anything else. JT is, let's see here. The screen just jumped. JT is hurting himself, and could this make JT stay? Let's sign. I don't think any of this is impacting JT Realmuto. I think they're just going to get the deal done. I think they pretty much know the parameters of the deal. I think Realmuto is just holding out, hoping they give him a little bit more. You think McDaniel goes to Baltimore because one of Harbaugh or Stefanski is going to get the Giants? I saw an article from 2 different writers for Bleacher Report saying Harbaugh has very much has eyes for Cleveland, and same article essentially, except for the Giants. So if I'm Harbaugh, where do I want to go? Honestly, I've been in one place for 18 years. I enjoy my stability, but do I want to prove my mettle with a roster that's perennially struggled and go to an in-division rival in the Cleveland Browns, or do I go to the New York Giants, arguably one of the most, I'm not going to say popular, but most talked about divisions in sports? Commanders, Giants, Eagles, Cowboys. For as much winning as they do in this division, they get talked about way too much, in my opinion, and that's even from a Cowboys fan. Eagles, of course, have won a couple of Super Bowls. Giants have won a couple of Super Bowls since then. Commanders had one good year anyway in the last 20. But overall, this division just ain't it when it comes to winning football. If I'm Harbaugh, do I change the narrative around the Giants to the days when Eli Manning was beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl? Do I view Jackson Dart as the quarterback for the future? Those would be the questions I would have. As far as Stefanski, I would not be surprised if he gets the Atlanta Falcons job. Saw a couple of headlines when he was released. The Falcons were going to be pursuing him quite fervently. And I think the issues there in Atlanta are just about getting that offense really rolling. Defense has had its question marks, of course, as well. But I think if he's able to bring in a defensive coordinator that he likes, he had a really good one there in Cleveland and Schwartz. I think he'll have a good 1-2 punch there. And if he can solve the issues there with Penix offensively, that team could be ready to go in that division. That division is preeminently winnable. So we'll see what happens there with Stefanski. I mean, if the Giants want to really knock out of the park, true, I would say Harbaugh would be the best hire for the Giants, but don't be surprised if they go with a Mike McCarthy or one of the other names that you might be surprised by. But Harbaugh would be the pick for me. Do you think Pete Carroll will be the next Cowboys head coach? Hell no. I think they're very happy with Schottenheimer right now. I think he's going to stay in Dallas for at least 2 more seasons. And if I know anything about Jerry Jones, he's going to probably give him a couple more years after that. So now, as far as defensive coordinator, I think they're going to cast a very wide net. I think they're going to talk to a bunch of guys. I think ultimately they're going to sign somebody that they're comfortable with, not necessarily somebody that's best for the job, but somebody that they're comfortable with. So don't be surprised if it's a new name as a defensive coordinator and not a retread. For me, I would prefer probably Brian Flores as my number 1 guy I'd be trying to pursue. I'd make a call to Cleveland about Jim Schwartz to see if I could get him as my second option there. And then, take your pick among some of the other head coaches that were fired. Gannon, Raheem Morris, others that could be interesting fits on the coaching staff there in Dallas. Head coach Harbaugh, OC McDaniel, DC Pierce. I would love that if I'm the Giants. I would love Pierce back in the Giants umbrella there. I think he got a really bad deal out there with the Raiders. I thought he did a really nice job with that team. His ability to lead that group of men with the talent level that they had, just a great job there by Pierce. Harbaugh, though, would be the head coach. I agree there. Would Pierce be comfortable being the DC there long term? That would be a question. And McDaniel, I think, working with Jackson Dart, I think you'd have to tell him to get down a little bit more. Don't have the concussion issues that Tua has, and kind of orchestrate this offense a little bit better. I think they've got some nice pieces going forward, but I do like the way you have that Harbaugh, McDaniel, and Pierce grouping as the next coaching tree for the Giants. You saw the Phillies had a meeting on Monday with Bo and his real interest. Yes, very true. Collective bargaining uncertainty will limit long-term contracts. Absolutely lock smart. If salary cap hits, the long-term contract will be albatrosses to a certain degree. I think you see that with the NBA right now with the second apron rules, and how Kevin Love kind of spoke out against it, how it's affecting trades that are getting moved, or trades that are being discussed, names that are able to be moved, the return packages that could happen, forcing players to stay on bad teams, and so forth. The impacts of that type of thing, of the salary cap on Major League Baseball, I don't think there's a way to quantify them yet. I think there's so many variables here. What would the number would be for a floor? What the number would be for a ceiling? Would there still be thresholds in it? Would there be, what would the penalties be? All those kinds of things. If I know John Middleton, he wants to go long term. Maybe. I guess is the best way to put it. Do you think Klay Thompson gets moved? 100%. If I were just making a quick trade, let me pull this up real quick. Fanspo. Trade machine. One trade I really like if I'm the Mavericks for Klay Thompson is I go to the Lakers and I give them 2 pieces that they really need. I would really like making a trade with the Pacers with one of these pieces, but I think the Lakers picks might be more valuable. So, say you trade Gafford to the Lakers, you trade Thompson to the Lakers, Kleba goes back to the Mavericks, Vincent goes back to the Mavericks. I'm not saying you're going to put in D'Angelo Russell because I know J.J. Redick would have a conniption if D'Angelo Russell ultimately went there as well. Now, you're still not quite there either. You need one more contract in there. You could throw in Dalton Connect possibly. I don't think he really does anything for this trade, but that would be an interesting one. We're going to try it just to see if the money works. How close are we? 4.5. So say if you took on a third team in this deal, say you did the Kings, who have all kinds of players they're looking to move, and just see if they can get any value for. So you trade Connect to the Kings instead. You trade Vanderbilt to the Kings and Hachimura to the Kings. You get Monk as a backup ball handler. And you can still take on roughly $7 million. You would love to get DeMar DeRozan. You're not going to get him. You're not going to get Keon Ellis. But a $7 million player, a guy who can play some defense, Najee Marshall would be a great piece here. If I'm giving up Hachimura, though, let's take out Monk. Instead of Monk, you do DeMar DeRozan. So now you've really upgraded your wing group here. You're at 55. You're not trading Bronny, of course. Who's a low-cost contract that they could absorb here that would help them a little bit? You take a Brandon Williams as a backup playmaker. Trade him to the Lakers. McDermott. Eubanks as a big. Reynaud has been fantastic for the Kings. He looks like a nice piece for their future. Do you bring in a Russell Westbrook? I don't think so. So you do a Brendan Williams, something like that. And then your picks anyway, got about $9 million you can absorb if you're Dallas. You could absorb Saric, I suppose, save the Kings a little bit more money. But in either event, the picks are the important part here for Klay Thompson. You can't trade 26. You can't trade 28. Can't trade 30. You could trade 31 or 32. So say that 31 pick, you do it unprotected to the Mavericks. And to the Kings. You do a second round pick to the Kings. And maybe another second rounder if the Mavericks have one here. 32. We'll throw that to the Kings as well for the DeRozan piece in this. How close are we? We're good there. 1.6. So who's on the back of this roster? Tiro. I don't know, give him to the Kings, I guess. Then the Kings are over by 1.6. So instead of Tiro going there, you send him to the Mavericks, and the Mavericks cut him. Still hard capped, huh? Now $5 million. I must have missed something. In either event, it looks something very close to this. Some of the smaller contracts would be worked out. Alright, let's check out a few more of these comments and probably hang it up here in probably another 15 minutes or so. If you guys want to send your trade possibilities to us, either MLB or NBA, we're going to talk quite a bit of NBA in the second half of our videos over the next month with the trade deadline coming up. Can you do Sabonis plus Monk trade to the Raptors involving quickly? I can do that one for you. That one's actually a pretty decent idea, but I think the more likely is going to be the Kings taking on Jakob Poeltl in that deal. So Sabonis goes to the Raps with his exploded, ruptured knee, along with Monk. Quickly goes to the Kings. Yikes. Look at that guard rotation then. Schroeder, Westbrook, Quickly. Ugh. Okay. What else would you have to include? You'd have to include Podol in this one, you'd think. $19 million. If you didn't put him in there, you'd probably have to do Barrett, perhaps, or some combination of Akbaji. Dick, and maybe Murray Boyles. How close are we there? 10.9. It's without including Podol, it's going to be very difficult. Now, if you left out Monk of this from this trade anyway, you could get a lot more interesting deal here. I think if you put Keon Ellis going in here, I think this deal would still be very similar as far as value, but as far as costs, this might be easier to get done. Because now you're outgoing 46 from the Kings, incoming 50. You're looking good for both sides financially, right? Yes. So now you just need picks to be thrown in here. And so the Raps would probably have to throw in a couple of first-round picks. So say the 26th pick, they throw in there because it's not going to be a high pick, but it is a very good draft. So that pick would be a nice one to have. And then they throw in, I don't know, the 30 or the 28th pick to the Kings, top or lottery protected. So there you go. 2 firsts in exchange for Sabonis and Ellis. You take on the contract of Quickly, and you get a couple of young players in Dick and Boyles to grow around. Not horrible. They say LeBron out with multiple injuries. That doesn't sound good. That's also part of getting old. You're going to have your knee hurts you in the morning, your back hurts you in the middle of the day, you bump your elbow as you're going in and out of a room for something dumb, you hit it on the doorknob. It's just things that happen to you as you get old. I'm not saying LeBron is a geriatric, but in NBA years, Father Time has passed him by. Do you think the Sixers have a chance to win the East if healthy? I do. I think pretty much any team, if I were to give you a list of teams that I think could win the East, it's going to surprise you. Because to me, there isn't a favorite. I think that's why a team that makes a big move for Anthony Davis, if he's still healthy after the hand injury today, a team that makes a difference-making move like that could certainly jump to the top of it. To me, the Knicks have got to be up at the top of this thing along with the Pistons and Celtics. To me, those are the 3 best teams with the 76ers right behind them. I don't have the Raptors as the 4th best team in the East. I think the Hawks could get into that group there if they add an Anthony Davis. The Cavs, if they figure out how to play basketball again, they could be in that conversation. But they've been terrible this year, and I think that's a team that could very well change up their roster quite a bit this offseason. Magic haven't gotten the results from the Bane trade that they would like. Heat, obviously, are a Giannis trade away from being a Giannis trade away. The Bulls are terrible right now. I don't know why they're just trying to tread water, but it seems to be what this organization does. But as far as teams that, if they make the right move, I think could have a legitimate chance to win and get to the finals. I'm not saying win, but get to the finals. Pistons, Celtics, Knicks, 76ers. I'm still going to throw the Cavaliers in there, even though I don't think they will. I just think that team has so much talent, and if they just get it right on the floor, I think they'll be fine. I don't think they need to make a move. I think Max Strus coming back healthy will help with that floor spacing, but Garland has looked like a shell of himself. If he can get back to being at least a 80% type of a player of what he used to be, he could certainly be a nice improvement for them. Magic, I'm not going to put him there yet. I just don't think they have the shooting, even after the Bane trade. I like the growth Anthony Black has shown this year. He looked like a bust of a lottery pick, but over the past couple of years, or coming into the year anyway, but this year he looks like he's really taken a step. Stepping in for Suggs and others as they've had multiple injuries to that team. Wagner with Bancaro and now with Suggs. He's really stepped up this year. Okay, so this brings us back to which teams have a chance. Pistons, Celtics, Knicks, 76ers, Cavs. I'm not going to include the Magic. I just don't think they have the shooting. Heat, I don't think they have enough, even though they're playing a very different style than what they have in the past. but playoffs slow down. It's going to be a very different style of gameplay for the Heat at that point, and that's when the real warts start to show for that team. So I'm not including the Heat. Bulls, not give me a break. Hawks, I think, can be in there. I think with the trade of Trae Young today, actually improved their roster. I like McCollum's fit and Kispert's fit with this team a little bit more. Gives them a little bit more offensive punch as far as shooting, rather than just sheer volume scorers that they were relying on with Trae Young and others. Dyson Daniels has been terrible offensively this year. That contract jumps to 25. He was one of the best young players in the NBA as early as last season. And now we look at his contract, and I'm wondering, $25 million for a player who's shooting 12% from three-point range. He's borderline unplayable when he's shooting at that level. The numbers will come around, but until they do, gonna have some questions about Dyson Daniels and that shot, but we'll see. Other teams that could have a chance, the Bucks with Giannis. I mean, they're looking to try to be aggressive at the deadline. They could be one of the teams that tries to land Anthony Davis. They could be a big move away, like a Zach LaVine, from really shaking things up in the East. I'm going to leave them in that conversation because no team can really handle Giannis, honestly. The Hornets have really stepped up, but they're not a title contender, nor are the Nets, Wizards, and Pacers. If you guys think the Nets, Wizards, and Pacers are title contenders this year, they're not. I'm not going to argue. But just in case, we have that Nets stand out there as like, these rookies are playing great. They'll figure it out. They'll build around Michael Porter Jr. No, they're not. Porter Jr. will be traded. On the West, who is a real title contender? Thunder, Spurs, Lakers, Nuggets when Jokic is back. Rockets could have Fred VanVleet back for the playoffs. Timberwolves, can't rule out Anthony Edwards. I'm not going to include the Suns. I'm not going to include the well, I'm going to rule out the Suns for now because I don't think they make a big move that makes them a contender. The Warriors, if they make the Anthony Davis move, could enter that class. So I'll leave them in that conversation for now. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams so far. Blazers, too early, but they're starting to play a lot better basketball. Grizzlies look a lot better than what they did to start the year, but they're still so very far away. Mavericks were supposed to be a title contender according to Nico Harrison. No, they're not. They are not a title contender. Clippers are a play-in team. They're not a title contender. Jazz, they're playing much better basketball as of late. I really like this team going forward, but they're not a title contender. Kings, give me a break, and Pelicans, no. So that gives you a good group of teams that could make a run this year. So if you're trying to see if your team will be active at the deadline, just use those lists and see if your team has if there's a player out there on the market that really fits the need for one of those teams I mentioned. All right, why do you think the Cavs not look as good as last year? What is missing there? Garland's health, Garland's play, Jared Allen's play, although he had a good game the other day. I really didn't like the Twin Tower building that they did because neither one of them could really shoot from the outside. Mobley can occasionally, but it's not consistent. Allen is not either. So this is a team that was flawed as far as the makeup is concerned. They were going to be predicated on defense and Donovan Mitchell shooting the three, and the 3-point shooting of Merrill, Wade, of Strus anyway was really going to be dynamic for them. And Hunter's had a down year, but it really boils down to Garland for me and the how do I put this? When a player decreases in his ability to play the game. Recession. It's not what's the word I'm looking for? Sophomore slump. No. Anyway, Jared Allen is not living up to what the numbers that are on the back of his basketball card, and he's really kind of backpedaled as far as his value this year. And I think those are the biggest reasons for the Cavs not being as good. Garland is missing. True. All right, let's try to keep this thing going here. Welcome in, Eric. Appreciate you joining us once again. Sam, welcome in. Because Detroit replaced a new sheriff in town. Detroit's pretty good. It would probably be Quickly and Podol. Yeah, I'm not sure about that Podol contract, if it's tradable this year or not. If it is, obviously it'd have to be included in that Sabonis deal. No way San Francisco signed anyone with qualifying offer. Seems like they're staying away. They have to save all their money for the international draft. To a certain degree, teams like to save their money in that regard. But as far as qualifying offers go, I don't think this was the year for the Giants to really do that unless they were going to get one of the big fish here. If they were going to get a Kyle Tucker, that would have been the player I'd really tried to go for entering this year. Obviously, as we get to the deadline, as we get to the end of the year, there was nothing you were hearing about the Giants being in on those players. Maybe they're just looking to save their money going into the CBA negotiations, like most of the other big market teams. They wouldn't want to trade Colin Murray, Boyles, or Mamu. True, I would try to hold on to those two pieces as well, but Boyles is never going to be a top 5 player on that Raptors team. He's going to be a good bench guy, a good energy player, but he's never going to be a player that gives you, 20 a night, 20 and 10. He's never going to be that player. So if another team really wants him, to utilize him off their bench, if they see real value in him, even though I don't think there is, I think he's a good, energy type player, and that's about as good as he's going to be. If they're willing to give you something for him, and you like what you might be getting, by all means do it. Where do you think Nolan Arenado goes? I think he's going to have to settle for going to a team like the Angels at this point. Let's go Cubs. They get Cabrera, absolutely. Talked about that one last night, but the trade itself, 3 pieces, including the number 1 Cubs prospect in Casey and the number 11 prospect in the Cubs system, go to the Marlins. This is a deal that was negotiated at the deadline as well, and the holdout there was Casey. Cubs basically said, we don't want to move him in any trade. They ultimately held on to him, and the thought process was he was going to be one of their starting outfielders to enter the season. That is no longer the case. For whatever may have changed from the trade deadline till now, the only thing I can really think of is got a little bit more clarity on where he's going to play defensively. Do you feel comfortable with his glove, his speed in the outfield? Do you feel comfortable with his ability to stay on the field health-wise as well? Or do you decide to play him at DH and just have his bat in the lineup? I think that's the real question for the Chicago Cubs, and I think they got the answer, and they didn't like the answer. And so that's why they were willing to part with him, as opposed to having him being on their opening day roster and mashing for that Chicago Cubs team. I think he's going to be a very productive hitter in the game. I think the Cubs will miss him in that lineup, but I do like what they got in that deal. They got a number 3 starter in there with upside of a number 2. That's probably going to be thrown out there as a number 1 type, at least until Steele gets there and is healthy. So we'll see what happens with the Cubs, but to me, they still need to add more pitching. And if you believe the reports out there, they're still looking for offense as well. Who do I got tomorrow, Indiana or Oregon? Probably Indiana. Why was the Heat game postponed? Because condensation on the floor. They play at the same arena anyway with the Chicago Blackhawks, and the ice is underneath that. And so sometimes NBA floors will have condensation from that ice underneath. Usually it's from the overnight crew putting it in place that didn't get something set properly. And, it's just they were never going to fix the issue once the condensation issue became a real thing. Unless they were in the middle of, changing the floor, they're not going to really be able to solve it. The only thing they can really do, which we've seen teams have issues with condensation when they have a shared multi-use arena with the ice underneath and the floor on top, when they have condensation issues, as long as they can get the game started and can dry the floor every 10 to 15 minutes or so, that should be just fine. But didn't seem like that was the case there in Chicago, and so they just decided to move on and see if they could just postpone the game as well. Regression, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Breggy, welcome in. B. Lee, appreciate you joining us. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate you joining us as well. It's 12:35 a.m. on a Friday morning now at this point. Be prepared for a cold snap next week, so hopefully that gets teams and owners and front office guys in the front office to actually get on the phone and see if they can get these negotiations done, as opposed to being on vacation like they have been through Christmas and New Year's. So I want to see some activity here. Yankees need to start making moves and stop holding on to Belly. Reach out to Tucker and offer him a contract and see who signs first. I think they're going to try to get Bellinger first and foremost. I think the holding on to Trent Grisham with the qualifying offer, with the Jason Dominguez question out there as well, and now with Cabrera being traded, it's unlikely that Dominguez is going to be moved at all. You don't really have a hole for him out there in the outfield. You could try to horseshoe him in there, but for me, Bellinger is still the player that they're going to try to bring in. If the Jays land Tucker and try to make a move for Bo, what would it cost them to get Miller from roster players? Miller. You're referring to Mason Miller? If they land Tucker and they try to make a move for Bo, like if they tried to offload some contracts here and try to bring in Miller as a closer, I think the ask would probably be Barger or Yusevich, and I would say no to both of those. I think the most likely option would be them trying to offload a contract like Santander. Maybe move on from Luke, see if they can get some value for him. He's still got some value out there. Had a nice season last year for the Jays. That'd be one way to at least create some playing time there for Bichette. But as far as Mason Miller, using roster players, unless you're including Yasevich, I just don't really see it. I mean, the Padres are going to want a starting pitcher. The Mets are going to offer better starting pitcher prospects out there anyway. They have real interest in Jonah Tong from the Mets. I just don't think it's going to happen. But as far as clearing up room for Bichette, I think you're going to probably have to lower your sights here. Maybe trade a Luke's or some, another bench piece, elsewhere, and just declutter that spot there, and then maybe add in return for one of those pieces, a depth piece, a fifth starter, something along those lines, a backup catcher. Somewhere in there, I think, would be the best way they would ultimately decide to go. I see that everything is quiet on the all sports news. It is, for the most part, not too much going on right now, aside from the injury to Anthony Davis's hand. Trade conversations there. A little bit newsy on the top guys in free agency right now with Tucker, Bellinger, Valdez, and Bregman all getting big updates right now. If they landed both Tucker and Bo, you think Barger is expendable? I wouldn't trade Barger ever. No. He would be a hard no for me in any trade negotiation. To me, he is the future offensive piece for this team. I like Clement as well. As far as what their futures hold for the Blue Jays, they got the aircraft carriers locked in there with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and if they add a Kyle Tucker, that's another aircraft carrier to continue to build around this team. Again, I'm trying to win a series. I'm not trying to offload Barger in an effort to upgrade my bullpen. If I'm going to upgrade my bullpen, I should have done it via free agency, and they did do plenty in free agency. But I would hold on to Barger. I don't see there's a move out there that for Barger that would make him quote-unquote expendable to me. He's far too valuable with the way this roster is and the way they need that youth on that roster as well. Breggy, I don't understand the Yankees are confident in Jason and see him being traded. I agree there. I do like the Martian. I just don't think he's going to move either. I think the Yankees view him very highly, as they should. He was a top prospect and still shows the ability time to time with that with the prospect status that he once had. But to me, he hasn't quite established himself as the monster we thought he was going to be. But we'll see how this year goes for him. I think this could be a kind of a make or break year for him as far as how much do the Yankees really value him in their future planning. If this year goes well, obviously they could consider him a stalwart in that lineup and see if he can become a star. If things go horribly and things just don't work out by midseason, he could be a player that we see being dealt at the deadline for another team that might be able to offer him more playing time and a chance to become the monster we thought he would eventually become. Locksmith, Martian can't hit against lefties. To a degree, I'll agree there. He has his struggles against lefties as a left-handed hitter. They're missing a closer, as the front office has said over and over and over again. There aren't any closers really on the free agent market, and there's not too many on the trade market either. Mason Miller is that guy, but are you really willing to give up a starting pitcher prospect, a guy that looks like could be a number 2 at worst in your rotation for years to come? I would say no. I would rather hold on to my starting pitching, and I think he'll ultimately end up going to a team like the Mets if he gets traded, which again is a big if. Let's see, they will go after a closer after Tucker is signed. Again, there's not a whole lot of great options out there on the free agent side of things. Trade side of things, I could see a couple other names being thrown out there. Rockies pitchers, none of them have really great years. Most of those guys who were having good years were traded at the deadline, but they do have a couple of options that you could turn to if you wanted to go to Colorado. There's a couple other teams that have a nice couple of depth options in their bullpen as well that you could choose from. Jojo Romero is another piece that we talked about last night that is available from the St. Louis Cardinals. We mocked a trade of him to the Red Sox last night if you want to check out that video. All right, been a long day. Appreciate you guys spending some time with us, talking a little bit of hoops. Anthony Davis trade possibilities, talked a little bit about Bregman, Valdez, Bellinger, Tucker, all the big guys, Bichette as well. But really do appreciate you guys joining us as well. Why are the Reds not making moves? They've tried. They're just not necessarily the name market for some of these teams. And so until some of these big players really move, the market's kind of clogged up right now. We will get some resolution fairly quickly. And then I think the Reds anyway, will make some moves as well. All right, stay safe out there, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow evening. We will be live around 9:30, 10 o'clock, hopefully. Work has been ridiculously long this week, so if it's another late night, could be another late live stream as well. But really do appreciate you guys taking the time to join us as well. St. Louis loves trading with the Jays. They love trading with the Red Sox more. They've already made, what, 3 trades so far? Sonny Gray, or was it 2 trades so far? Sonny Gray, Contreras. I feel like I'm missing one, though. They're talking about Donovan, talking about Romero. I feel like I'm missing one of the trades that the Cardinals and Red Sox have made. It's at least 2, maybe 3. Anyway, but we'll be live again tomorrow. Well, I guess late tonight anyway, around 9, 10 o'clock hopefully. But y'all stay safe out there. I got to get some rest, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow night.